gốc thì sẽ nhận được screen đăng cái thậm chí rất là nổi tiếng mà chúng ta cũng có biết qua cái trường hợp, qua cái bài báo cáo của cái bài báo về tiến sĩ Dương Thị Ngọc Lan và cái tờ ghi là Journal of Medicine. Bây giờ là cái bài báo cáo của giáo sư Đặng Quốc.
I don't think you can see me behind the podium, so I'll stand like this. So I've been asked to give you a talk on screening and prevention of preeclampsia and our recent experience from a very important trial, the Aspirin trial. So I'm here to talk to you about that. So I don't know whether you routinely provide screening for preeclampsia in Vietnam, but certainly in many parts of the world, we are adopting one of the two major guidelines that you know of. One is from the UK, the United Kingdom. With that, we take a history from a woman. If a woman has one major risk factor, or that she has two or more moderate risk factors, then she should be started on aspirin from 12 weeks till the birth of the baby. Okay, and then on the other side of the pond of Atlanta, then basically in America they recommend that women should be started on aspirin if she's had one previous early onset preeclampsia or that she's had two previous affected pregnancy. Then she should be started on aspirin 75 milligrams from 12 weeks till the birth of the baby. But the problem with this approach is that they did not tell us how effective this method of screening is, and therefore we have applied the methods of screening using our data from 120,000 single-teen pregnancies. And we can confirm that history can only detect only around 40% of cases of preeclampsia requiring delivery before 37 weeks of gestation, and the detection rate, the sensitivity is even lower if you're talking about term preeclampsia requiring delivery after 37 weeks. And as for the American approach, and as you can see, the detection rates are even lower. So I think these two methods of screening are not fulfilling the WHO recommendation as a good screening test, as we are missing a large number of women that could be benefiting from aspirin. Okay. So when I was involved with this study back in 2005, I was asked to develop a method of screening. So how do we do it? We were very pragmatic. We decided that let's go for a similar approach as for Down syndrome screening. In the last talk, you heard about cell-free DNA test, which is a recent development of the last 5 years. But back in 2005, we were using the combined test. It's something that we do regularly with the measurement of fetal nuclear translucency thickness, together with various biochemical markers. So we decided to adopt the same approach for preeclampsia. The first thing that we did was to determine the background risk of women with maternal history. So in the last slide, I was attacking the NICE and the American Congress recommendation, but actually I was attacking the way we utilize the information of history. So, you know, with their approach, they were just treating individual risk factor as a single test with additive detection rate and false positive rate. And so, we are now using a mathematical model to combine these risk factors. The good thing about this mathematical model is that we can treat continuous variables as such, meaning that you use height and weight as continuous variables. We don't dichotomize the weight and height. So today, if I have a body fat mass index of 35, I'm high risk. But yesterday, I didn't eat as much, so I was 34.99999, and I was low risk. So we need to move away from dichotomizing continuous variables. So with a mathematical model, we can do that. And the second thing that we could do is that we can also reduce someone's risk. Okay? In the previous NICE and APOC approach, with every risk factor, you can only increase someone's risk. You cannot reduce someone's risk. So this is another benefit of our approach. And then we apply a very conceptual mathematical approach to combine all these risk factors. We are assuming that all pregnant women were to remain pregnant indefinitely, and then all women will develop preeclampsia. But whether preeclampsia happens or not depends on whether delivery happens before preeclampsia develops or thereafter. But this is a very, very conceptual idea, but we have incorporated that in a risk calculator that you don't need to worry so much about, because that's all taken care of in a risk calculator. So we have established the basis of our risk factor model, history. Okay, and then subsequently, we wanted to find out several biomarkers for the prediction of preeclampsia. We did a search for more than 50 biomarkers, and essentially we boiled down to 3 key factors. One is the measurement of blood pressure. I mean, obviously we're in an ultrasound congress, but still, I'd like to remind everybody the importance of measurement of blood pressure. And the most important thing is that you must measure blood pressure according to a standardized guideline, just like anything that you do. And we have established the standardized guideline, okay? We must use automated devices which are validated for use in pregnancy and preeclampsia. Because if you use automated devices that are not suitable for pregnancy, then you will always underestimate blood pressure, and that could be dangerous in the screening as well as diagnosis of preeclampsia. And we recommend that women should be rested. I think that's easy to understand why. And then we must have the arms supported at the level of the heart, as you can see in this picture. And then you need to use the right size cup, because obviously too small a cup will overestimate blood pressure, and too bigger cup will underestimate blood pressure. In Vietnam, probably is not a problem that you don't see many obese women, but certainly in Europe, we have a lot of obese women. We need to take care of that. We need to measure blood pressures on both arms simultaneously at the same time, once and then twice. So in the end, you have 4 measurements, and you take an average of the 4. Okay, and that's what is going to be incorporated in the risk calculator. So the second biomarker that we are advocating for is the measurement of uterine artery Doppler. This is where you come into. It's very simple to do. It can be done at the time of the routine 12-week scan when you assess for fetal size by the measurement of primary rate, and you can spare a minute to measure the uterine artery pulsatility index. What we tend to advise for is that you use the abdominal probe, place it in the suprapubic area over the sagittal section of the cervix, okay? Then you fix the probe in the midline, and then turn on color Doppler, as you can see here, and you tilt the probe very gently to the sides of the cervix. Then you will see the color Doppler of the uterine arteries on either side of the cervix. And that's where you can sample the uterine artery PI, okay? And basically, it's very important not to slide the probe, fix in the midline, and then tilt from side to side, because the cervix at that gestation is not very, very big, okay? So sudden movement will lead you to sampling the vessels in the lateral wall. So this is extremely important to remember. And then you need to ensure the sampling gate of 2 millimeters over the whole vessel, ensuring the angle inclination of less than 30 degrees, checking that the peak systolic velocity is over 60 centimeters per second. This is important because surrounding vessels will inevitably have a PSV less than 60 centimeters per second. You measure the left and the right. You take an average of the 2. So this is very easy to be done. That can be achieved in 1 minute of your scan. Then, third biomarker that could be useful in the prediction of preeclampsia is from the blood. Again, for Down syndrome screening, we routinely take blood for the measurement of PAPA and 3-beta-2G. And then, in the same sample, using the same platform, we can measure placental growth factor. Okay? In preeclampsia, we have an imbalance between androgenic factor. So this is one that promotes placentation and is reduced. And the opposite is true for the anti-androgenic factor. But this factor is not so easy to be measured at 12 weeks. So we focus our work on placental growth factor. So over the last 10 years, we have measured these 4 parameters in cases of preeclampsia. As you can see, the biophysical markers, uterine Doppler, mean arterial pressure, the measurements at 12 weeks are raised with a negative correlation with gestational age at birth for preeclampsia, meaning the higher the value of uterine Doppler, mean arterial pressure, the higher the chance of preterm preeclampsia. And the opposite is true for the biochemical markers. The values are reduced at 12 weeks with a positive correlation with gestational age at birth for preeclampsia. So the lower the value, the higher the chance of preterm preeclampsia. With all of these work, all of these scatter plots, the most important thing is probably this table. Essentially, I'm telling you the different combinations of the combined screening that we have developed and the respective performance. Of course, we are always advocating for the best model, the triple test. History, measurement of blood pressure, uterine Doppler, placental growth factor, achieving 77% for preterm preeclampsia. Not so good for late preeclampsia. But if you tell me this is not affordable in Vietnam, like many parts of the world, then you might adopt one or two of the components of the combined test. Let's say if a woman is already having combined test for Down syndrome, then we already have PAP-A, and we can measure blood pressure. We are achieving 62% detection rate. But if a woman can have a blood pressure measured and uterine Doppler measured, we can achieve a detection rate of 70%. I accept that not everywhere in the world can provide a triple test, but I think we need to move away from history-only screening method. We need to do better than just taking a history. We can at least measure blood pressure and PAP-A. And hopefully you can add the uterine Doppler. Okay? But again, if you tell me 77% detection rate for preterm preeclampsia is really not that great, we can't do that. We can do better. So another way of thinking about this is that we can focus on very early onset preeclampsia, required delivery before 34 weeks, achieving detection rate of 90%. Okay? Another way of looking at it is that because we're not doing an invasive procedure, we're not doing a CVS, we're not potentially causing a miscarriage, we don't need to fix our false positive rate of 10%. We can adjust the false positive rate to 20 for a detection rate of 85% or even 30% for a detection rate of 90%. So this is obviously a decision that a society and a healthcare professional has to make. But there is another way of improving detection rate, is what I'm saying here. Okay? So, does it work in other parts of the world, this method of screening? We have proven that through the Asprey trial, the prediction model works in 5 other countries in Europe, not in Asia. Okay? We have proven that this works in Spain, Belgium, Greece, Italy, and even Israel. And on the right, this is an error plot of the performance of screening based on the data that we have used to develop prediction models. So you would say that the detection rates are overfitting. So let's have a look at this screening study, validation study, of nearly 9,000 women. We can confirm that the performance for early onset preeclampsia, preterm preeclampsia, and term preeclampsia in the purple error bars, we are achieving equally good in a prospective independent study. So let's refer to my first slide, looking at the existing method of screening with NICE and ACOG. And for preterm preeclampsia, I think it's very, very evident we are by far the best method of screening for preterm preeclampsia. For term preeclampsia, there is room for improvement, and hopefully that will be our direction in the future. And we have also established a very important aspect in Asprey, is that we must have a method of quality assurance, just like the measurement of NT for Downs. And through the Asprey, through the EpiMath website, we will generate reports like this to tell you that your measurements of blood pressure, which are not your droplet, percent growth factor, are well within the acceptable limits. And if they are exceeding the acceptable limits, then we'll give you feedback so that you need to find out why something is not quite right. So the first lesson from the aspirin trial is that we have validated the prediction model in a new data set, in a prospective cohort, and also we have highlighted the importance of quality assurance. So how about prevention? Now we have established an effective method of screening, then we should have an effective method of prevention. Okay? So through the aspirin trial, we have done that. So let me go through the whole story with you. Okay? First of all, what information do we have when it comes to aspirin for the prevention of preeclampsia? And it dates back to 1980s. We wanted to find out if aspirin can prevent. In fact, in this very important landmark study published in The Lancet, this study, 102 women at risk for adverse outcomes were randomized into either aspirin 150 milligrams and dipyridamole 300 milligrams every day from 12 weeks versus nothing. And you can see that in the treatment group, there were no cases of adverse outcomes, whereas in the no treatment arm, there were cases of preeclampsia, fetal death, or severe fetal growth restriction. So from this very first landmark study, the conclusion is that aspirin given from early pregnancy to high-risk women may protect against preeclampsia, fetal growth restriction, and intrauterine death. But what happened afterwards is a mystery to me. Over the last 40 years, many studies have looked at the importance of aspirin in the prevention of preeclampsia, and that has been summarized in this second landmark paper from The Lancet in 2007. And they basically summarized the data of 31 randomized trials, and including more than 32,000 women. And only 24 of the 31 randomized trials were focusing on aspirin. The conclusion from this meta-analysis was that aspirin could only reduce the rate of preeclampsia by 10%. I was halfway through my thesis for developing the prediction model of preeclampsia. I was very disappointed with this meta-analysis because I was like, what does it mean now? I have no method of prevention. Does it mean there's no room for a method of screening at 12 weeks? But we did not despair because we figured out why this meta-analysis showed negative findings. One thing is that out of only 2 of the 24 randomized trials, they only used a dosage of 150 milligrams per day, but the others were using a much lower dosage. So I think that is why, one of the reasons why they use a suboptimal dosage. And also the timing of when to treat. And as you can see on the graph on the right, okay, only a few studies were focusing on giving aspirin before 16 weeks of gestation, and then the rest were giving aspirin as and when. Even 2 studies were giving aspirin in early 3rd trimester pregnancy. And thirdly, 15 different definitions of preeclampsia were used in these 24 trials. So it's not surprising that this very heterogeneous meta-analysis concluded that aspirin is not effective. So my life changed in 2010 when the Canadian group published a series of meta-analyses confirming that if you give aspirin before 16 weeks, we could achieve a 50% reduction in the rate of preeclampsia. And if you give aspirin after 16 weeks, then the effect is not there. And if you focus on the more severe form of preeclampsia, preterm preeclampsia, perhaps we can reduce the rate of preterm preeclampsia by as high as 90%. So when we planned our study, the aspirin trial in 2011, we needed to optimize everything, meaning the screening process as well as the treatment regime. One thing that we did was we gave aspirin at nighttime, based on this trial of Ayala et al. This was a trial of 6 arms. Aspirin, morning, afternoon, and night. Placebo, morning, afternoon, and nighttime. They have concluded that by giving aspirin at night, it achieved better reduction of preeclampsia, growth restriction, gestational hypertension, and hemorrhage. So we followed this study, we decided to give aspirin at night time. Another very important fact, despite the fact that the first trial in 1985 used a dosage of 150 milligrams, we needed more evidence to convince us that we need to use a high dosage. So this very recent meta-analysis has confirmed the idea is that if you were to give aspirin before 16 weeks, you need to go for a higher dosage of aspirin. So the higher the dosage of aspirin, the lower the relative risk for preeclampsia and severe preeclampsia, meaning the greater the reduction with these adverse outcomes. So we have decided to also go for a dosage of 150 milligrams. So this is the protocol of the aspirin trial. We've stuck with 150 milligrams every day from 12 weeks because that's following screening of Down syndrome and following screening of preeclampsia. We stopped aspirin or placebo at 36 weeks to minimize the risk of hemorrhage to fallen neonates. We're giving aspirin at night time, and the outcome of interest was preterm preeclampsia because that is the condition that is associated with a high rate of adverse outcomes in both the mothers and the babies. And we use our method of screening for preeclampsia. And we basically have 13 centers across 6 countries. We wanted to screen at 12 weeks to identify 10% of women at high risk. We were assuming 60% of women would participate in the trial, or we randomized women into either placebo or aspirin 150 milligrams. It was double-blinded, so nobody knew whether they were getting aspirin or placebo. And we were aiming to achieve a 50% reduction in the rate of preterm preeclampsia, and we needed 1,600 women randomized. And this is the main result, okay? And on the left, you see the concept diagram, the typical diagram you will see in a randomized trial. We screened 27,000 singleton pregnancies. We identified 11% as high risk, and then we recruited 1,700 women, and then some of them were lost to follow-up, and some of them withdrew consents. In the end, we had about 800 women in each arm for final analyses. And then a very important part of our study was to ensure drug compliance. And I'm pleased to report that 80% of women achieved good compliance, taking more than 85% of tablets, okay? On the left, you can see this is the Kaplan-Meier plot, and the purple line represents the aspirin arm, and then you can visually see that the rate of preeclampsia is reduced by at least 50%. Okay? That translates into the result on the right here. An 82% reduction in early onset preeclampsia, 62% drop in the rate of preterm preeclampsia, and sadly we do not see any reduction in the rate of term preeclampsia. I think with regard to term preeclampsia, there are two thinking behind that. It's either aspirin is so specific for placental type of preeclampsia, meaning early onset preeclampsia, we eliminate early onset preeclampsia, and it does not have any impact on term preeclampsia because we believe that term preeclampsia may not be related to placental disease. The other thinking is that perhaps we basically reduce the severity of preterm preeclampsia and shift the preterm preeclampsia into the term preeclampsia group, and therefore we did not see any reduction in the rate of term preeclampsia. We also wanted to know whether the various factors would impact on the treatment effect size. We have concluded that the different risk groups have no impact on the size of the treatment effect of aspirin. So we can give aspirin to any high-risk women, okay? And also obstetric history, whether the woman is in her first pregnancy or whether she has had preeclampsia in her last pregnancy. Again, the treatment effect size of aspirin is not impacted by whether she's in her first pregnancy or whether she's in her second pregnancy. So this is important. So lesson 2 from aspirin is that aspirin given to high-risk women at a dosage of 150 milligrams every night from 12 to 36 weeks of gestation reduces the rate of preterm preeclampsia by 62% and early preeclampsia by 82%, irrespective of the risk and irrespective of her obstetric history. Okay, this is important. I mentioned the importance of compliance, and we were very, very religious in checking whether the woman was good with her tablets. If we didn't do that, this trial would have failed because, as you can see, if women were not good at taking tablets, meaning that they were taking less than 90% of their trial drugs, we would have achieved a non-significant 40% reduction in the rate of preterm preeclampsia. But of course, if a woman is very, very religious in taking her tablets, then she would achieve a 76% reduction in the rate of preeclampsia. So lesson number 3, aspirin compliance has a significant impact on the effect of aspirin, and drug trials in the future should take into account of compliance. Nearly there, okay? Another important fact from the aspirin trial is that it doesn't work in women with chronic hypertension, as you can see in this red dot. And women without chronic hypertension, you see that we achieve a very significant reduction in the rate of preeclampsia. And most importantly, if we focus on women who are taking tablets religiously, and then we can achieve a 95% reduction in the rate of preterm preeclampsia. So we must remind women that they should be compliant with the medications. Okay, lesson 4. Aspirin does not reduce preterm preeclampsia in women with chronic hypertension, and in women without chronic hypertension, the risk of preterm preeclampsia is reduced by as high as 95%. Secondary outcomes. You would be interested to know whether it impacts on smallness of the baby, perinatal death, and so forth. Sadly, we did not achieve a significance because we were for a 99% confidence interval. Normally you go for a 95% confidence interval, right? But because we were comparing many outcomes, so we needed to adjust for multiple outcomes comparison and went for a 99% confidence interval. So we were very strict to look at the impact of aspirin on secondary outcomes. But we were very pleased to see that even for small babies with or without preeclampsia before 34 weeks, we observed a non-significant reduction of as high as 70% for SGA with preeclampsia before 34 weeks, and 47% for SGA without preeclampsia before 34 weeks. And very importantly, we observed a non-significant 40% reduction in the rate of perinatal death. We did not see any concern with aspirin for abruption, and sadly we did not see aspirin in preventing the rate of spontaneous preterm birth, as suggested by other investigators. Okay? Let's look at numbers. As for stillbirth or neonatal death, although we observed a non-significant 40% reduction, but because that is based on a very small number of cases, 8 versus 14 cases, so these are very convincing results. As for neonatal morbidity, as a composite of the listed morbidity, we saw a non-significant 30% reduction, meaning 32 versus 48 cases. So, based on these results, we believe that aspirin has the potential in reducing the risk of early onset small babies with or without preeclampsia, as well as perinatal mortality and neonatal morbidity. And lastly, you might ask me, we are smaller in Asia. Does it mean that we should reduce the dosage of aspirin? We should not use 150 milligrams. First of all, I can tell you that aspirin is safe in terms of side effects. Okay, the rate of upper GI upsets, vaginal bleeding, other bleeding are no different between aspirin versus placebo. So we don't worry about 150 milligrams of aspirin given to pregnant women. Okay? And another aspect is that it's been shifted, but I'm referencing to upper GI symptoms. In smaller women, basically the rate of upper GI symptoms and bleeding is not significantly different between obese and thinner women. So I can conclude that aspirin is safe, and the risk of side effects is not associated with body mass index. So thank you for your attention. And
thank you very much. You said that. Xin cảm ơn giáo sư Leona Phương. Để tiếp theo chương trình, xin kính mời thạc sĩ bác sĩ Trịnh Thị Thư Hương sẽ báo cáo về